I moved to the coast because silence felt safer than memory. After the divorce papers were signed and the apartment echoed in ways I didn't recognize, I packed my books into boxes that smelled like dust and left the city before it could ask me to explain myself. The town I chose had a harbor that went quiet at night, like it was holding its breath. My rental sat above a bakery that woke me at 5 with the smell of bread. I liked that. It meant something was happening, whether I was ready or not. The first morning there, I sat on the floor with my back against the couch and listened to the refrigerator hum. I remember thinking that this was the sound of starting over, a low, steady promise that didn't ask questions. I told myself I'd come for peace. I told myself I'd stay out of people's stories. On my second day, the woman next door knocked because my porch light had been left on all night and it was shining straight into her bedroom window. She stood 2 steps back, polite, a paper cup in her hands like she might leave if I blinked wrong. She wore a gray sweater and her hair was pulled back, practical, no performance. I apologized too much. She smiled once, quick, like a reflex she'd trained herself to keep small. "It's fine," she said, "just the light." She pointed, then added, "Leave it on during storms. It helps the moths find their way." I didn't know if that was true. It sounded like something you say when you want to leave a sentence somewhere gentler than it started. Her name was Mara. She owned the bakery downstairs. She smelt like yeast and orange peel. That was it. Door closed, silence returned, the light went off. We passed each other the way neighbors do when they don't plan to become anything else. A nod, a wave with groceries between us. The weather did most of the talking. Wind off the water, fog rolling in like a held thought. One afternoon, I dropped my keys between the slots of the porch. I crouched there longer than necessary, pretending the problem required concentration. Mara walked by with a crate of lemons balanced on her hip. She stopped. "You can slide a magnet on a string," she said, already reaching into her pocket. She handed me a thin cord with a little metal hook tied at the end. It had flour smudges on it. I use it when things fall into the oven vents. I laughed, surprised by the sound. It came out wrong, like a cough that wanted to be something else. She waited while I fished the keys out. "Thanks," I said. "I owe you." "You don't," she said. "Just leave the light on during storms." There it was again. I watched her go, the lemons knocking softly together, a sound like applause you didn't earn. At work, my days were precise. I joined meetings, I took notes, I kept my camera on even when I didn't have to. The company was a glass tower kind of place, even though we were all remote now. Transparency as a value, efficiency as a language. Our CEO, Lena, ran it like a tide schedule, calm, exact, unavoidable. I'd admired her from a distance for years. Admiration is safe when it's abstract. She spoke in sentences that knew where they were going. She asked questions that made room. When my calendar pinged with a one-on-one from her, I assumed I'd messed something up. She asked how I was settling in to the coast. I told her about the bakery smell and the harbor quiet. She listened. Then she said, "I'm asking you something personal. You can say no." I felt my spine straighten. She explained that her sister's wedding was coming up. The sister was marrying my ex-wife's cousin. "Small world," she said, like it was a joke we could both set down gently. "I don't want to go alone," Lena said. "I don't want to be available for commentary." She smiled, a real one this time, and it startled me. "Would you be my date?" I agreed without knowing why. Maybe because I was tired of saying no. Maybe because the word date sounded like a shape I could step into and then step out of again. Maybe because Lena asked like she trusted me with the answer. When the call ended, I stared at my dark screen and waited for the feeling to arrive. It came later, when I told myself I'd need a suit. Mara and I shared space without touching it. She left a bag of bread on my porch with a note that said, "Too much crust today." I left a jar of jam I'd bought at the market with a label I peeled halfway off, embarrassed by how fancy it looked. We didn't eat together. We didn't plan anything. The routine itself felt like a conversation. Morning smells, evening nods. One night, a storm rolled in fast. The harbor bells rang. I stood on my porch and watched the rain make the street a mirror. The porch light was on. Mara stepped out, hair loose now, sweater darker with damp. "Thank you," she said, gesturing to the light. "It keeps the dark from feeling bossy." We stood there, the rain doing all the talking. She told me she'd moved here after a breakup that had rearranged her sleep. I told her I'd moved here because my apartment started sounding like a question. We didn't ask follow-ups. The storm moved on. She went inside. The light stayed on. The first time we spent more than 5 minutes together was because my sink backed up. I'd tried everything I knew, which wasn't much. Water pooled like it was waiting for permission. Mara knocked, holding a wrench. "You sound like you're arguing with plumbing," she said. She worked without ceremony, kneeling, sleeves pushed up, explaining as she went in a voice that didn't assume I needed saving. "Sometimes it's just a trap," she said. "Sometimes it's everything you didn't see coming at once." When the water finally drained, we both laughed, relieved. She washed her hands and dried them on her sweater. I offered coffee. She hesitated, then nodded. We sat at my small table, knees almost touching, the mug warming my palms. She asked about my work. I told her what I did without the armor I usually wore. She told me about waking at 3 to bake, about learning to listen to dough. She said, "It tells you when it's Freddy. You can rush it, but it won't forgive you." I thought of my marriage. I thought of all the times I'd pushed. We sat there until the coffee went cold. When she left, she paused at the door. "Leave the light on," she said, smiling, and I realized she was teasing me now. That felt like something. The wedding loomed like a weather system I couldn't track. Lena sent me details, colors, time. I bought a suit that fit like it had been waiting. I didn't tell Mara where I was going. It didn't feel like information that belonged to our quiet. The day before I left, Mara handed me a paper bag with a loaf still warm. "Travel bread," she said. "It keeps better if you wrap it in a towel." I did. On the plane, I thought about the way she said it, like she was talking about people. At the hotel, Lena met me in the lobby. She looked different out of context, like a painting taken off a wall. We were good together in public. We were kind. We were not pretending to be more than we were. At the reception, my ex smiled at me like she was relieved. Relief is a strange gift. I danced once. I stepped outside and breathed in night air that wasn't mine. Lena joined me. "Thank you," she said, "for being steady." I told her she didn't need me to be anything else. She nodded, eyes on the stars. "We all need somewhere to put the quiet," she said. It stayed with me. On the flight back, turbulence shook the plane like it was trying to wake us. I thought about the bakery smell. I thought about leaving lights on. When I got home, the porch was dark. I turned the light on before I unlocked the door. The next morning, Mara was waiting with a plate of something sweet. "You're back," she said. It wasn't a question. We sat on the steps and ate with our hands. Sugar stuck to my fingers. "How was your trip?" she asked. I told her it was okay. I told her okay was better than I expected. She nodded. "Sometimes okay is a victory," she said. I believed her. The shift came on a Tuesday, which felt right. Nothing dramatic ever happened on Tuesdays. Mara asked if I could watch the oven while she ran to the bank. "It's just 10 minutes. If it beeps, turn it down." I stood in her bakery, surrounded by warmth and timers, feeling trusted in a way that surprised me. When she came back, she leaned against the counter and closed her eyes. "I'm tired," she said. It wasn't a complaint. It was an offering. I told her she could sit. We shared a stool. The beeper went off. I turned the dial. She watched me like she was seeing a version of me she'd suspected but hadn't named. "Can I tell you something?" she asked. I nodded. "I stayed too long once," she said. "I thought loyalty meant endurance. It turned out it just meant I was afraid to leave." She laughed softly, without humor. I blamed myself for years. I waited. She took a breath. "Failure isn't the breaking," she said. "It's the listening. You don't fail because something ends. You fail when you stop hearing what's asking to change." The words landed like a hand on my back. Something in me loosened. I thought of my ex, of the ways I'd kept score instead of listening. "I'm trying to do better," I said. It felt like a confession, even though it wasn't detailed. She smiled, tired and kind. "Me too." That night, I left the porch light on without checking the weather. The harbor bells rang once, distant. I sat at my table and wrote an email I didn't send. I folded the travel towel with the breadcrumbs still in it. I understood suddenly that quiet wasn't the absence of noise. It was the presence of choice. I started noticing the light differently after that. Not just whether it was on or off, but how it moved. Morning light slid across the bakery windows in a way that made the dust look intentional. Evening light pooled on the porch like it was waiting for someone to step into it. I found myself timing my walks to the sound of the oven timers downstairs, not to see Mara, at least that's what I told myself, but to feel the day click into place. Routine has a way of pretending it's neutral when it's really choosing sides. We didn't talk about the confession again. We didn't need to. Something had shifted, like furniture moved in the dark that made the room easier to walk through without bumping your shin. We talked about smaller things, the harbor seal that barked like a broken laugh, the way fog erased the line between water and sky. She taught me how to cut bread without crushing it. I showed her how to mute notifications without missing emergencies. We learned each other's quiet tells. Her left hand tapped when she was thinking. I rubbed my thumb against my ring finger when I was holding something back. She noticed first. "You do that," she said one afternoon, not unkind. I stopped. "Do what?" "That," she said, touching her own hand, mirroring me. I smiled, embarrassed. "Old habit," I said. "I'm unlearning some things." She nodded like she understood what that cost. Work ramped up. A product launch had the team buzzing like static. Lena scheduled late calls that respected time zones, but not sleep. I didn't mind. Structure felt good. One night, my screen froze mid-sentence. I stared at my own face, pixelated, trying to remember what I'd been saying. The doorbell rang. Mara stood there with a plate covered in foil. "Emergency," she said. "I made too much again." I laughed and let her in. We ate standing up, the plate between us. "You okay?" she asked. I nodded, then shook my head. "I will be," I said. She didn't push, she didn't fix. She stayed until the meeting ended, then slipped out like she hadn't altered the night. But she had. She always did. The first, almost moment happened in the alley behind the bakery. A delivery truck blocked the street, and we squeezed past each other to carry crates inside. Her shoulder brushed mine. It was nothing. It was everything. We both stilled, a beat too long. She stepped back first. "Sorry," she said, already moving. I watched her go, the space she left humming. That night I dreamed of standing under a streetlight that kept flickering. Every time it went dark, I held my breath. Every time it came back on, I didn't move. The external thing arrived quietly, like most real complications do. A woman named Claire came into the bakery on a Thursday, confident, familiar. She kissed Mara's cheek like it was a habit they'd forgotten to stop. I was at the counter, pretending to read a sign about sourdough schedules. "I'm in town," Claire said, "for a few weeks." Mara's smile was careful. "Okay," she said. They talked logistics, coffee later, catching up. I left with my bread and my heart doing a small, unreasonable thing. That night, the porch light stayed off. I turned it on anyway. I didn't know why. Maybe because storms don't always announce themselves. Mara pulled back without drama. She answered texts slower. She stopped lingering. She baked earlier so we didn't overlap. It wasn't cruelty. It was fear with good manners. I recognized it because I'd worn it myself. I didn't chase. I remembered what patience had felt like when Lena asked me to be steady. I remembered Mara's line about listening, so I listened. I let the routine stretch without snapping. I focused on work. I walked longer routes. I learned the Harbor Bell schedule until it stopped feeling like a question. Claire became a name with weight. I learned she and Mara had history that predated the bakery. Big plans, bigger promises. "She wants me to consider starting over," Mara said one evening when she finally asked me to sit. We stayed on opposite ends of the bench, the space between us respectful and loud. "She says she was good." "Were you?" I asked, careful. Mara looked at the water. "We were intense," she said. "We were loud. I mistook that for alive." She swallowed. "I don't want to fail again." I thought of the oven timers. "Listening isn't failing," I said, borrowing her words and giving them back. She smiled, sad and grateful. "I know," she said. I just need time to hear myself. Time passed. Not much, enough. The bakery hosted a small town event, a night market with paper lanterns strung like careful thoughts. I volunteered to help without asking why. We worked side by side, comfortable again in the doing. When the lanterns lit, the alley glowed soft and unreal. Music drifted. People laughed without urgency. Mara stood next to me, close enough to share warmth. She didn't look at me when she spoke. I told Claire no. Not because of you, because I don't want to live loudly just to prove I'm alive. My chest tightened. I'm glad you chose yourself, I said. She nodded. Me too. She turned then, eyes steady. If we try, she said, it has to be quiet. It has to be chosen. I smiled, relief and something like hope settling in. I'm good at quiet. I'm learning to choose. We didn't kiss, not yet. We stood there while the lanterns swayed, the light doing its patient work. Later, when the street emptied and the harbor bells rang, we walked home together. At the porch, she stopped. Leave the light on, she said, soft. I did. The quiet after that felt earned. Not fragile, not tentative. It felt like something we'd both agreed to carry with clean hands. We didn't announce anything. We didn't redefine the shape of our days. We just let the routine widen enough to hold two people instead of one. Mornings started including an extra cup on the counter. Not every day, just enough that it didn't feel like a test. Sometimes I'd wake before the bakery opened and sit on the porch with my coffee, the light still on from the night before. Mara would come out later, hair pinned up, apron tied crooked, and we'd exchange a look that said we were both here on purpose. No rush, no performance. The first real intimate moment came without a soundtrack. No rain, no dramatic sky. It was a late afternoon. The bakery closed early because the mixer finally gave up. We sat on the floor amid sacks of flour and a smell that clung to everything. She leaned her head against the wall. I mirrored her without thinking. Our shoulders touched. She exhaled, long and honest. I didn't move. The intimacy wasn't in the contact. It was in the restraint, in the shared decision not to ask the moment for more than it was ready to give. After a while, she laughed. "This is ridiculous," she said. "I should get that fixed." "You don't have to fix everything today," I said. She closed her eyes. "I like how you say that," she replied. Work through another curve. Lena asked me to travel again, this time for a conference near the coast. She'd be there. "Strictly professional," she said, smiling. I told Mara about it because it felt like the right kind of transparency. She listened, hands busy with dough. "Have fun," she said. Not casual, not jealous, just present. At the conference, Lena and I shared panels and late dinners with teams. One night, walking back to the hotel, she stopped. "You seem lighter," she said. "Something changed." I thought of porch lights and oven timers. "I learned to listen," I said. She nodded, satisfied. There was no tension, no confusion. It felt like closure I hadn't known I needed. When I got back, the porch light was on. Mara was sitting on the steps, jacket around her shoulders. "Storm," she said, pointing to the clear sky. I laughed. She stood and, without ceremony, took my hand. It was brief, grounding. Then she let go. "I wanted to see if it felt right," she said. "It does," I replied. We didn't kiss then either. We walked inside and made soup with whatever was left. We ate quietly, the kind of quiet that doesn't ask to be filled. The pullback returned, but softer this time. Not fear, responsibility. Mara's bakery faced a lease issue, rent rising, the kind of problem that doesn't care about your timing. She grew distant again, not from me, but from rest. I watched her carry it alone until I realized that patience doesn't mean absence. One evening, I brought a folder with notes I'd made, numbers, options, nothing intrusive. "I don't want to fix it," I said, setting it down. "I just want you to know you're not carrying it by yourself." She stared at the folder, then at me. Her eyes filled, surprised by their own response. "Thank you," she said, "for not making it about you." I smiled. I've learned some things, I said. The town noticed us then, not with gossip, with acceptance. A nod that lasted longer, a smile that assumed. We didn't correct anyone, we didn't confirm. We let it be what it was becoming. One evening, as we closed the bakery together, Mara turned to me. "I'm scared," she said, "not of us, of how peaceful this feels." I understood. Peace can feel like a trick if you've lived in noise. I took her hand again, this time not letting go. "We can choose it every day," I said. "Or not. Either way, it's ours." She squeezed my hand, grounding me the way the harbor bells ground the night. We kissed later, finally, under the porch light. It was gentle, unrushed. It felt like agreement more than desire, though desire was there, warm and patient. When we pulled back, she rested her forehead against mine. "Leave the light on," she whispered. I did. The weeks after felt like a careful exhale. Not relief, not victory, just breath returning to places that had been tight for a long time. We didn't rush to name anything. We didn't rewrite our pasts to make room for each other. We let the days stack up, ordinary and reliable. The bakery lease worked out in a way that wasn't perfect but was fair. A longer term, a smaller increase. Mara didn't celebrate loudly. She sat on the floor again, back against the wall, and let the quiet settle. I sat with her. That was becoming our language, being present without crowding the moment. My ex sent a message I didn't expect. Not dramatic, just a note that said she hoped I was well, that she'd seen a picture from the night market and thought of me. I didn't feel the old ache. I felt gratitude. I replied with kindness and finality, and then I put my phone face down and left it there. Choice, I was learning, was a muscle. It got stronger the more you used it. Lena called once more, this time just to check in. No agenda. "You found your quiet," she said. I smiled. "I found something I choose," I replied. She laughed. "That's better," she said. When the call ended, I noticed my porch light was off. It was a clear night, no storm. I left it off for a moment, just to see how the dark felt. It felt fine. Then I turned it back on anyway. Not out of fear, out of habit that had become care. The public acknowledgement came without a stage, a Saturday morning market. We stood in line for apples. Mara reached for my hand like it was the most natural thing in the world. No announcement, no glance around to see who noticed. The moment existed whether anyone else did or not. The vendor smiled at us like he'd always known. We walked home with bags cutting into our palms, laughing about nothing. Time skipped gently. Summer leaned toward fall. The light changed its angle. The harbor bells sounded deeper. One evening, we sat on the porch steps, sharing bread, the same towel wrapped around it like the first time. Mara leaned her head on my shoulder. I didn't freeze. I didn't brace. I stayed. "You know," she said, "I used to think peace was boring." I smiled. "What do you think now?" She tilted her head, considering. "I think it's brave," she said, "because you have to show up without the noise." Later, when the street emptied and the night settled, I stood to turn the light off. Mara touched my wrist. "Leave it on," she said, smiling, "just in case." I looked at the glow pooling on the wood, the way it held the space for us. "Okay," I said, and for the first time in a long while, okay felt like everything.